Hi everyone.
Hello.
Okay, so continuing on with Maya's case, which today will be Deborah Hansen, and maybe some court matters. I don't know. Shall we get on with it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
One matter. Earlier today, we handed the court, and of course, we prepared and sent over to the defense last night
Sorry, it does the thing. Let's just skippity skip. There we go.
Today, we handed the court, and of course, we prepared and sent over to the defense last night the full exhibit list for all of the witnesses today, and we didn't get all the way through it, and when we were discussing it, I wanted to move in some of their policies and procedures. There's a number of them, but I only have 1, 2, 3, 4 to move in, and I'd like to move in 22-52001, which is the risk assessment for potential child absence. Can we pull that up for the court? This won't take a second, Judge. 22-52001. All of these are policies of Johns Hopkins, and I thought they were in the Johns Hopkins records, but apparently they're separate.
This is on midnight, late night.
How many pages is 2252?
2.
And how are we going to be using this?
This witness is a social worker,
Who's the witness?
Deborah Hansen. She's a social worker, and out of all of the ones that we listed from last night, we really only have one. We have that one. We have 2214-001 through 007.
Well, let's deal with one at a time.
Yes, sir.
So 2252. And it's some sort of matrix as to when to make an abuse report?
Yes, sir. That's,
Judge, this is going to be a recurrent theme with this witness, I'm afraid. This witness was a social worker who made the initial call to DCF on behalf at Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital. She saw this patient, the family, for about 2 hours on the day of admission. She's testified that she had about 10 to 15 minutes contact with Maya Kowalski that day, but most of her involvement with the case was making the first phone call. And this child abuse recognition matrix has nothing to do with anything that is left in the case after the rulings that have been made by the court regarding the good faith and reasonableness of the first of the phone calls in general, as well as the Chapter 39 immunity. So I don't see the relevance of 2252. A number of these policies and procedures they're trying to move in right now came over yesterday evening after I had looked at the exhibits for today. I was not aware until, frankly, this morning that these additional exhibits were going to be proffered today. But that one has no relevance, number one, for this witness in particular, but in general, as to the case any longer.
Mr. Anderson, it doesn't seem like this goes to anything that's actually in the case.
Judge, yes, it does, because our case is not predicated upon those 2 calls. Our case is predicated upon, on the medical malpractice side, about them, the timing of when they made a decision on a diagnosis and whether there really was any type of team or differential diagnosis. Debbie Hansen can testify, and she is in the medical records, 2 fairly extensive reports that she put in And she can testify to how the Kowalskis presented when they first came in, because she was there. She was on duty that day when they first came in. Whether Beata Kowalski appeared reasonable or whether she appeared to be out of control, as has been portrayed elsewhere in the records. She can testify to whether they were agreeing to stay or not to stay over the 24 hours, which is one of their big points. She can testify to how Maya ended up in the PICU so quickly. She can testify thereafter about the steps that needed to be taken, and mostly she can testify to before there was supposed to be any overarching diagnosis, especially any psychological diagnosis, how the social worker has to be involved by their own rules and regulations, and how she was told she did not need to be involved in this, and she was not going to be involved in this. And so her testimony...
So she's not involved, but she made a call to the hotline? It doesn't make
yes,
any sense.
That's exactly our point. She was directed specifically by Lisa Winton to make a call to the hotline before she completed her social psychological evaluation, which according to their rules is absolutely necessary. Not, and leave aside for a second the call, but that's necessary in the evaluation of the patient. So she has very important information to get before the jury about what the practices and procedures were. She had been there since 2009. She had been there at the time Johns Hopkins took over.
Well, 2252-001-002 go to nothing that is in this case. So
Well,
I'm gonna
because look
sustain-
at other
I'm gonna-
fictitious.
I'm going to sustain the objection that document's not coming in.
All right. And then
The reality is, you know, the court wrote, I guess about 2 years ago now on this, maybe a year and a half ago, about as soon as the court made the conclusion that there was, I forget the specific standard, but reasonable cause for the call, then Chapter 39 immunity applies. And I know I had some discussion about the good faith and all that, but you know, I concluded the existing case law forced me down the road that I went. And so
I understand. May I speak to that?
I'm confident on that ruling, and so I think we need to move on to the next issue.
So 22-14001, this is the mandatory requirement of a social worker being notified and involved in the event that there's any claim of medical child abuse, which there was to start with, morphing into Munchausen
Let's
by
put
proxy.
2214 up, please.
I'm sorry, this is like rinse, wash, repeat. This is the same sort of thing, Judge.
Hang on.
Well, again, to be fair to me, I need to see these exhibits. I don't.
Understood, Judge.
I haven't lived with 10,000 documents or 100,000 documents like you all have for years and years and years. Okay, so this is talking about making an abuse report, right?
No, that's
Policy statement 1A. All
yeah.
cases of suspected child abuse must be reported to the Florida Department of Children and Families Central Abuse Hotline.
That is true, Judge, but if you go down under C, social work services must be notified when a report is made or needs to be made to the appropriate agency. Social work services will assess the patient and family situation, coordinating the reporting process, and facilitate interviews made by the investigative agencies. I am not arguing this for the purposes of challenging. I specifically told the jury in opening we are not challenging those calls. What I am questioning here is the involvement of a social worker to complete the psychosocial analysis before a diagnosis is made, because we have the right under the medical malpractice count to challenge those initial diagnoses that were made.
Why can't you have the testimony, but why do you need this document that talks about sexual abuse and all these other things that...
Well, Judge, it's a party admission, and here's the big problem. If you recall, we brought up to the defendants and to the court when the entire record of Johns Hopkins was to be put in. We wanted to put in specific sections, if you recall. The defense objected and wanted the entire record put in. Now that record is in evidence, and it speaks at length into this entire process. And I do believe I heard the court in some of these summary judgment orders and otherwise directing us that the underlying facts are one thing, and the underlying facts are game. And the defendants here seem to have been playing along with that or agreeing to it because they rejected our overture to just put in the stuff that was relevant material. I believe the court would remember me talking about this, the hearsay contained within, but they didn't. They pushed strenuously for the entire report in. Now it's in. Now all those facts are in front of the jury. Since all those facts are in front of the jury, I should have a chance to analyze them under their own rulings. And that's my big concern here.
But the policy statement 1A talks about making reports to the Central Abuse Hotline, which is not an issue in this case.
The reporting isn't, but the fact that I understand, but the fact that all of that is already in evidence, I should be able to explain it somewhat.
Anything else, Mr. Hunter?
No, sir.
I'm going to sustain the objection. 2214 is not coming in.
All right. So the next one simply involves clinical policy. It is not directed to, I'm sure there are some areas in here that, I'm sorry, 2209-001 through 008.
Can I see the next couple of pages? Next page. Next. Next page. Next. There are 2 more pages. And then next. Okay.
Judge, this has to do with clinical documentation of patient conditions and diagnoses and treatment, none of which social workers make. There's no foundation for this to be admitted in connection with this witness's testimony. And it's not been shown to be relevant at any point in any of that.
It actually is under E8 there, and regardless of which witness it is, since we waived the necessity for a corporate records
Hold on a
custodian.
second. Okay, I see 2209 as being relevant in this case. I mean, how you chart something. I mean, there's a fraudulent billing count here as well. So I do think 2209 is relevant. So I will admit 2209. Now, whether this witness speak intelligently about this policy, I don't know, but 2209 will be received.
Next is 2237-001-004.
Is it
And
1
this is-
through 4 or just 1 and page 4?
It's 001 through 004.
This is discharging against medical advice.
Yes, sir.
Judge, the policy is relevant. I don't see the relevance of this witness.
It's 6.
It is.
It's 6 pages. It's 6 pages as opposed to 4.
Yes, sir.
I think the policy on against medical advice is relevant in this case, so I will receive 2237, overrule the relevance objection. Anything else?
So for the record, the flow chart for, it's 2237-005. Is this,
Didn't you just?
I just admitted 2237.
okay, sorry. Then, it's already in evidence, but just for the record, so we're clear, we're gonna be referring to Joint Exhibit 1001-2032 and 101 2030 to 2031. These are notes. I believe they're social worker notes
they
for
are.
the relevant time. They are in evidence. I was just doing something nice for council and know what I was gonna use.
We have those testified.
Is there anything else that we need to address?
I don't believe so, Your Honor.
Anything from the defense?
I'm sorry?
No, you're right.
Okay. Let's bring in the jury, please. Members of the jury, let me ask you a few questions. I want to confirm that while you were away, you did not discuss this case amongst yourselves. You did no investigation, you received no information. Is that correct? And since you were last with us, I want to confirm that no one approached you about this case. Is that correct? And while you were away, I want to confirm that you spent a lot of time watching the media and everything about this case. Y'all are paying attention. I appreciate it. So I want to confirm that while you were away, you did not see any media coverage about this case. Is that correct? Fantastic. Mr. Anderson, your next witness, sir.
Deborah Hansen.
Raise your right hand.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Come right this way.
All right, Ms. Hansen, will you state your name for the record?
Deborah Hansen.
And have you been asked to testify here because you were a social worker covering the inpatient room on October 7th, 2016?
Yes,
You remember that day?
yes,
And you remember the day all of this started, that day?
yes.
Before we go into those facts, the jury would like to know a little bit about you. You moved to Florida from Houston when you were, 13?
Yes.
And why the move?
My dad was hired by Bendix to work on the lunar module for the
For the space shot, the moon shot?
yes, going to the moon.
Did you subsequently go to college?
University of Florida,
And what years were you there?
71, 75.
And what did you study there?
Psychology and French.
Okay. And following that, did you have an opportunity to travel to Europe or before, after that?
After college, I went. It was 75, so there weren't many jobs because of oil. I went to France and was an au pair in Paris.
Did you get the chance to travel around Europe as part of that job?
On my free time, absolutely.
And so let's, before we finish, and I will go into the jobs in a moment, but did you ever return to University of Florida to pursue any advanced degrees?
Not University of Florida,
Where did you go?
Florida State University.
And what were you pursuing there?
Master of Social Work.
And did you achieve a Master's of Social Work?
I did.
After that, did you try any additional education towards your profession?
Yes. I was accepted to the first interdisciplinary public affairs program, PhD program at University of Central Florida. And interdisciplinary was health service administration, social work, criminal justice, and public administration.
And did you achieve a degree from there?
I was all but dissertation. I completed all the coursework and the qualitative exams, but I did not complete my dissertation.
Was that the equivalent of a PhD, or was it a PhD?
It would have been a PhD.
And you just didn't finish your dissertation?
I did not complete my dissertation.
All right. And so when you first left, tell us the first job you had that involved social work, whether by that name or otherwise.
The first job was actually with a sheltered workshop in Stuart, Florida.
Okay. And what did you do there?
I can't remember actually. Yeah, no, I did work with the population. They were disabled, mentally disabled, mentally, developmentally disabled.
You have a very soft voice, so you're going to have to pull that microphone a little closer to you, if not for the jury, for me. All right. And so then what was your next position?
I worked at a residential facility in Titusville, Florida as the Fran Walker, I forgot the full name, residential treatment facility for young female adjudicated dependent girls.
What were you doing with that?
I was doing some intervention and with the girls and sometimes group work.
Were any of these girls, had they been abused?
I can't recollect exactly, but they would likely have been abused.
They were all challenged.
They were adjudicated dependent. And
all right. And what did you do after that?
I was hired in West Palm Beach as a child with the state of Florida in West Palm Beach as a child abuse case coordinator.
Now, is that the predecessor to DCF?
That is DCF.
That is DCF. And again, what part of DCF did you work for? As a case coordinator, were you like?
Yeah, for children.
Okay. Was that were you part of a particular team, or was this
So when children are deemed, they go to court and are sheltered or placed out of the home for abuse or neglect, then they're placed on a care plan, and I was the case coordinator with a care plan to work with the families.
How important are these case plans on either side, that is the parents and DCF?
If a parent doesn't complete a care plan, we try to work with the parent to help them overcome any barriers to following the care plan. But if a parent is unable to follow through outside of the barriers, then they may lose the rights to their children. Rights are terminated.
But if they never sign the care plan, they're not obligated, are they?
Sustained.
Was there I'll come back. Okay, so how long did you do that?
I think until I was with the state of Florida, till 83, but I did child abuse as a case coordinator, I think until 80, and then I was hired as a child abuse investigator, so the first call comes in would go to an investigator who investigates child abuse. So then I was hired for that position, and within a year I was hired by the Orlando Regional District.
Again, with DCF?
State of Florida, yes. At that point, it was the child protection team. They were newly formed, the child protection teams. So I was one of the...
And what did you do there?
When a child was, there was suspicion of child abuse, the state of Florida, they were investigating, so the investigators would bring the children in to the child protection team for medical evaluation.
And did you do part of that?
I was part of the team that did the medical evaluation. I didn't do the medical, I did the psychosocial.
And tell the jury what psychosocial evaluation is
So
in this context.
So a psychosocial is looking at social factors, cultural factors, and social factors would be an education, employment, history of abuse in the family. It's more the social and the dynamics, family dynamics are all part of trying to understand this dynamic.
All right. And again, how long did you do that job?
I did that job from 81 to 83.
And what did you do after that?
I got married.
Okay. And
Raised a
then
family.
and you had children?
I had children.
3 of them?
Yes, sir.
And how long were you out then, or did you then go to the PhD program after that?
I started the PhD program in 98.
Okay. And were you in it then, what, until 2001, 2002?
Yes.
All right. And so then what did you do?
I started working at, I went back to work as a social worker at Orlando Regional Medical Center.
Okay. And were you familiar with their policies and procedures while you worked there?
Not all of them, but...
But as they applied to you?
Yes.
All right. And was there anything in particular you did at Orlando Regional?
I worked with adults. I didn't at Orlando Regional. They had a children's hospital, but I wasn't working at that department. So I did adults, and it was facilitating discharge planning with case managers. So I was under the case management department.
All right. Is this where you were working as an intermediary between the parents and the medical system?
No, in Orlando Regional, I was working with adults. So I actually was working in the intensive care unit.
Your training, is it both as to children and adults?
Yes.
So then, I understand after that, or as part of that, you sent over, strike that. At that point, did you join All Children's Hospital in a form or fashion?
Yes, I left Orlando Regional and Orlando to go to the Gulf, to be on the beach.
Okay.
And I moved to Tierra Verde and got a job at All Children's as a grant coordinator to develop a parent-to-parent network for bone marrow transplant and cancer patients.
All right. Again, you got to speak up a little bit, but as I think I heard you, these were pediatric oncology patients, kids with cancer?
Yes, and undergoing bone marrow transplants.
And why is that difficult? The bone marrow transplants?
Bone marrow transplants are painful as our treatment for cancer, and also there's always the risk of death.
Is it difficult for the parents?
Sorry. Absolutely.
Okay. And before we go any farther into Johns Hopkins, All Children's, where do you work now?
I work at a boarding school up in New Hampshire as a psychotherapist.
And where
A
is
counselor.
that?
Sorry, it's my title as a counselor.
And where is that?
Concord, New Hampshire.
Okay. And how long have you been there?
A year.
Oh. So this first job was setting up a network of parents, or was it a one-to-one parent system?
It's mentoring a parent who had been through the experience of bone marrow transplant or childhood cancer. I would match those parents with a parent coming into the program with a newly diagnosis or undergoing bone marrow.
And
was undergoing bone marrow transplant.
I understand. When did you get your license first? Are social workers licensed?
Not all.
Are hospital or medical social workers licensed?
Not necessarily.
What licenses are there for them?
In Florida, it's a licensed clinical social worker.
For what?
For Florida.
Okay, for Florida. And what are they in Florida?
Licensed clinical social worker is the license.
And when were you licensed?
2015, I believe.
Okay.
I completed all them. I took my time.
Okay. All right. So tell us about then after the parent mentoring, the bone marrow transplant program. What did you do after that?
It was a 1-year grant, and as I was completing the grant, I was asked to take the position as pediatric oncology social worker at All Children's Hospital. I declined. I didn't need to work, and I traveled.
Okay. And did there come a time that you came back to Johns Hopkins?
Yes, 2009.
And at that point, was it still All Children's?
Yes.
And what was your position there?
They offered me, they said, would you like this job, the pediatric oncology social worker position? I took it at that point in time. The person who had taken the position in 2007 left in 2009.
And so what were your duties and responsibilities? Let's take it forward to October of 2016. But generally, what were your duties and responsibilities? Strike it. Did you stay in that role up
Yes.
to 2016? All right. And explain a little bit about what that role at Johns Hopkins All Children's at that time entailed.
So the role is psychosocial support for children and families under experiencing childhood cancer. And most parents, when they hear their child has cancer, it just immediately is my child going to die? So I spend a great deal of time working out whatever their barriers to care are, access to care, providing support for the families, working with families about grief in that area, anticipatory grief or actual loss of a child.
So were you then like a patient advocate, or was it a different job?
Well, I would certainly advocate on behalf of the parent and families and represent their voices in the multidisciplinary team. Psychosocial care and cancer care is a very important role.
And again, as part of your job, would you explain how the hospital system, the medical world works?
Sometimes, yes. It's a very complex.
Now, as part of these jobs over this time, did you have the opportunity to meet people of all different nationalities, cultures, types?
I got to meet people from different countries, different cultural backgrounds.
Okay. And Latino?
Latino, yes.
Black?
Yes.
Indian?
Yes.
And a few Asian folks?
I can't remember, honestly, Asian, Indian, but I can't remember Asian, sorry.
Okay. Eastern Europeans?
Yes.
Okay. And so, had you had any experience prior to the wall falling in 91, excuse me, with any parents from Eastern Europe?
I'm not sure.
It would have been rare, but...
Before 91? Before the...
Yes.
So, at any time in my career, would I have worked with families who lived under the Eastern Bloc?
Correct.
Yes.
On more than one occasion?
Yes.
On more than one occasion before you met the Kowalskis?
At least once. I'm not...
All right. But did you make it a point then to understand different cultures, different needs?
I always try to understand. After living in Europe, I always wanted to understand other cultures. I spent a month in Greece, and it was like a third world, and it was...
Well, can you tell the jury why in this position of explaining to, for instance, doctors' symptoms or how the hospital operates, understanding a culture might help? It goes to...
She can answer.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Sure. Why is it important to understand different cultures in your role as a social worker, every place, but particularly at Johns Hopkins?
it's important to understand culture, families' culture, because that can impact the way they understand it, the symptoms, what the symptoms mean, what the cause of the symptom is, how you would treat those symptoms, the stigmas attached to different parts of the medical system. I can give an example if you'd like.
Sure. I think you had informed before about was it Somali, African, and explain why that might be relevant.
So Somali families,
This is simply a predicate to demonstrate an example of how you do their job.
Sustained as to this specific one.
Because it's, I understand. And then in general, did you come across cultures where certain ideas, concepts, such as even depression, were unknown? Or not?
Families would understand what sadness, they knew sadness, but they didn't know it as depression.
And that was part of your job?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. Where to begin?
Yeah.
Should we do from... So, what do you think of her so far?
She's. It's interesting to listen to her, that's for sure. For war progress. I'm a little bit annoyed that she was not allowed to show the demonstrative thingy, because that would.
What demonstrative thingy?
That example they wanted to bring up with the Somali.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's because, see, we both, I think, anyone listening would understand why
Yeah.
that would be brought up.
Mm-hmm.
I do think the example is not the greatest.
No.
However, I understand why it's being brought up. It's so, jury members who might not know, that, different countries, different cultures, they behave very differently, and, some cultures, they don't show emotion, some are very emotive.
Yeah.
Some, possibly like Beata Kowalski, have an aversion to authority because of what they've gone through.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure why they didn't bring up, because she said that she'd worked with at least one family or parent from before the war.
Mm.
So I'm not quite sure why they didn't bring that up, or maybe someone Polish.
Mm.
Sorry. I'm not quite sure why,
No, it's like.
I don't think it was a good example to bring up, but also I'm in two minds. I agree with the objection and it being sustained, but I also don't agree with it simply because, they might not know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Oh, yeah. I had other thoughts about her. It was like her position she had.
Yeah.
Why have it so? Why is it so? Why do people leave it so fast?
Especially social work. I mean, it could just be a cultural difference.
Yeah, but
Because, here, when you're a social worker, you're a social worker for life, really.
oh yeah.
You don't... It's difficult to fire someone, isn't it?
Yeah. Also difficult to hire someone because you need the proper staff.
Really?
Yeah.
You mean
Yeah.
some of the assholes in there have qualifications? They
Yeah.
were not stopped.
Yeah, unfortunately, our little council here have, but they like.
They've managed to find people with Napoleon complex, it seems.
Yeah.
But I mean, in the UK, I don't know how it is in America, but in the UK, you can have like locum, so essentially social workers that aren't stationed at a council. They'll go to different. They normally work with an agency, so they can take on emergency cases or go support, or essentially they're not within one council. But it's not that unusual to go from council to to move about, because I mean, my dad, he didn't go council to council, but he took different jobs that meant he moved offices. So that isn't unusual. So it might be that I don't want to say that the person before that took the job whilst, the one that she rejected, which she then 2 years later accepted. If the other person had got promoted, she would have said promoted, but she said they left.
Yeah. It was there like 2 years, then it left. Then the person left.
And also, the weirdest one, that she's now working in New Hampshire. But she moved specifically. She went to Johns Hopkins specifically because she wanted to be by the beach.
Yeah.
So why move away? A year before she was. I wonder if she got if they did their depositions at that point, and the hospital was panicking. Because she actually reminds me of an old teacher I had. Her name was Mrs. Danielson. She looks a lot like her, dresses a lot like her as well. But she, she was very, she had a strong moral compass.
They probably forced her shut.
Oh, well, they probably got pissed off at her and made her job difficult.
Yeah.
'Cause, I mean, I really do think that on cross they're going to try and say that they're going to imply that she's a disgruntled ex-employee.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I don't see it being any other way, really, that they can try and essentially dismantle her character. Because how she's been so far is that she's taking time to answer it. She's not. There's care and precision in what she's saying. So she's not throwing out answers. She's thinking about it. She's taking care. I mean, not. I would be very happy if she was. If I needed a social worker, or if my kid needed a social worker, I'd be very happy with her being my kid's social worker or my social worker. Just from this. There's some bits here. I'm going to mute this because it goes quite quickly, like they click through it. Okay. So this one, was it allowed in?
Yeah, it was allowed in.
Are you sure?
Yeah, it was. It was C there. I think it was because of that.
Okay, so clinical policy, clinical documentation. Because it's American, so 8th of November, 2015. Definitions. A. Charting by exception. Oh my god. It's A, not the. A philosophy or practice in which variances
Variances, yeah.
Yeah, to the defined normal. God, I've got a really ticklish throat, sorry. Define normal or previously assessed parameters. Must be documented when they are identified and until they are resolved or changed. This is considered a shorthand documentation method, not an absence of documentation, and should be performed after a baseline for the patient is established. B. Clinical staff. Any staff member that is involved in direct patient care. C. Computerized provider order entry. CPOE. A process of electronic entry of medical practitioner instructions for the treatment of patients under his or her care. D. Electronic medical record, EMR. A medical data repository consisting of clinical decision support, computerized provider order entry, CPOE, pharmacy and clinical documentation applications. D1. This environment promotes healthcare information sharing across inpatient and outpatient environments and is used by healthcare practitioners to document, monitor, and manage healthcare delivery within the all children's hospital system. E. Hard chart. The chart that contains paper documentation and other components of the patient's medical record. F. Lay entry. Information entered after the end of a completed shift or out of sequence of events. G. Modification. Corrections or changes in documentation during a shift by a consistent caregiver or the addition of information on a multidisciplinary form. H. Uncharting, in brackets, charting in error. Striking out information from a patient's medical record that is already permanently documented. This is accompanied by a required reason for this action. I. Within defined limits. Descriptors used when assessing systems based on normal textbook anatomy, not a normal for the patient. Each body system has a clearly defined definition of normal that can be found in the EMR reference text. Note, this is not the patient's baseline. J. Within defined limits except. Term used when at least one of the descriptors or normal in the EMR reference text for any body system is not met. Okay. Guidelines. A. Initial assessment documentation. A1. This is going to get fun. An initial head-to-toe systems assessment will be documented on every patient on admission and at the beginning of every shift to establish a baseline. A1A. I swear to God. Normal findings as defined in EMR reference text are documented by body system in the EMR as within defined limits. Wait, what? What? I'm missing a page.
Yeah.
Oh, try to go so fast. A1B. Significant assessments findings will be documented as within defined limits except in the patient's medical record and may or may not require provider notification. These include but are not limited to 1. I'm not going to go through that fucking list. 1. Any positive or negative changes in a patient's condition that need to be communicated to the healthcare team. 2. Events or complications that the caregiver's judgment necessitate interventions other than continued monitoring and need to be communicated to members of the healthcare team. B. Ongoing assessment, reassessment documentation. B1. Ongoing systems assessments will be documented based on clinical condition, provider order, and or nursing judgment. B1A. Assessments in the EMR that are within defined limits. I don't even know if you've heard any of that because I'm not near the mic, but now I am. Assessments in the EMR that are within defined limits do not require documentation unless changes are noted. Documentation will occur when the assessment findings change or when meets the within defined limits except or with interventions. B1B. Assessments. Don't you stop snickering. Assessments in the EMR that are within defined limits except require ongoing documentation. B1C. Stop.
It's not funny, but I'm still laughing. I don't know why.
Well, good luck down here then. Assessments continue at the specified intervals required by disciplines or condition of the patient as defined by departmental standards of care. C. Plans of care. C1. The nurse will identify and plan the patient's care based on needs identified by the patient's assessment and reassessment in collaboration with patient / family and other healthcare team members. C2. Every patient will have a minimum of one relevant and active care plan identified during hospitalization. C3. Ongoing review of patient health problems with modification of goals and interventions will be addressed throughout the hospital stay in collaboration with the patient / family and other healthcare team members. C4. Documentation. C4A. Upon admission, initial plan of care should be identified and initiated within 24 hours. C4B. Jesus. Ongoing. I'm not. 1. Update progress towards identified goals at least once per shift. 2. Review and modify goals, interventions based on clinical condition. 3. Initiate additional plans based on prioritized patient needs. 4. Discontinuing of plans that are no longer relevant. C4C. Jesus Christ. Plans of care should be reconciled upon discharge to reflect the most current state of established goals. Aha. D. Corrections in the medical record. 1. Paper documentation. D1A. When an error... I really wish I hadn't started this. When an error is made on a handwritten entry, cross out with a single line and write error, initial date and time over the line. No erasures, whiteout, scrubbing over, or removal of pages is allowed. D1B. Late entries in paperwork documentation are noted as a late entry, with the date and time of the entry and the time when the treatment, procedure, etc. was performed. D2. Electronic system, EMR. D2A. Uncharting is only appropriate for removal of information that was placed in error, e.g. wrong patient's chart. Bloody Nora. Only the patient who entered the data can perform uncharting. The rationale for uncharting must be documented in the designated box. D2B. Modifications during a shift by clinical staff are acceptable. 1. A clinician may also modify information entered by a student or patient care technician, PCT, as part of their review process. D2C. The modify function is also used for certain power forms, e.g. preoperative checklist, that are assessed by multiple contributors for subsequent supplemental documentation. E. Real-time charting and late entries. 1. Entries should be made as close as possible to the time that patient care is provided. 2. Duplication of data entry should be avoided when possible. 3. Late entries can be entered in the electronic system. Date and time should be adjusted, and the rationale for the late entry should be entered as a comment. Staff education. A. Initial education. 1. All clinical staff members will be oriented to the EMR during the orientation phase and as needed as updates are necessary. B. Ongoing education. 1. Education will be provided when system revisions, updates and upgrades are performed. 2. Additional education will be provided when necessary as identified by routine chart audits, chart reviews, or when practice or technology changes are initiated. 3. References for clinical documentation will be available to staff. C. Requests for enhancements to EMR. Is that there? Really? Okay. All staff members are to submit suggestions and recommendations to enhance the EMR via the Clinical Informatics Committee. So why did he want this one in?
Because they didn't go through with.
No,
Yeah.
this is records.
Yeah.
This is medical records.
Yeah.
So they weren't putting in the correct medical records then.
That plus it said that the treatments and stuff would go on go maybe
Oh yeah, because
communicated with the family, which they did not do.
oh yeah, and they were also charging the insurance
Yeah.
for CRPS.
Yeah, but they did not do the medical stuff.
Well, they
for the
weren't.
CRPS.
Yeah, they weren't treating her for that. So it's yeah.
So that's why they wanted this one in.
I'm not reading all of this. It just said this is pretty much with every single policy. If you've not worked in an office or with anything that has this type of stuff, it basically has to have a list of things like who approved it by and all of this stuff, and it does have to be reviewed. Oh, I'm not reading all of this. So yeah, it's it's a bit interesting as to why they have this. This should be with the well, in a different part, I guess. But that's just how they're doing it. So like here, this is why this has got a link, because it links to the last page.
Yeah.
But this should be me. Okay. That's up to them, really.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going back. Oh. So there's this one. I'm just going back to where it starts because there's another one before that.
Yeah.
They don't even. There's 7 pages. Where is it? Didn't even care to look at all the 7 pages.
No.
Yeah, so this is the one that he rejected.
Yeah.
Even though the first fucking page says sexual assault.
Yeah.
And it's got child abuse.
Of course, he wanted to reject. He was the judge.
Handling of child and adult victims of alleged or suspected abuse, neglect, or abandonment. They don't even show the whole. There's 7 pages. This is one of 7. So I'm a bit surprised that it's only 7 pages.
Yeah.
But handling of patients' records has 8.
Yeah.
It's very.
Yeah.
Even that shocks me. Because, they're not using narrow margins either. So this isn't narrow margins. Which is embarrassing.
Yeah.
I remember when I was creating it was data breach policy as well as conflict of interest policy for the company that I work for. I got told off because I used narrow margins and they said that not everyone's going to read that far across the page. And I was like, well, if they don't want to read one page, maybe they shouldn't work here. It doesn't go with the rest of the policies. Well, maybe you should change the policies because it uses less paper. Also, the size of my font wasn't right. 9.
That's quite big.
That's not. They wanted me to use 12, for fuck's sake.
Yeah.
But that's got nothing to do with this. At all. So this one we know that they rejected. Risk assessment for potential child abuse / neglect. Okay, so they've got types of injuries: skull fractures, upper extremities, ribs and spine, lower extremities, bruises, burns, other. So, automatic referral to social worker, hotline report to be made. Skull fracture of child younger than 12 months. Depressed skull fractures, complex fractures, multiple fractures or fractures with cross suture lines. Skull fractures associated with subdurals? Oh, okay. Scapular fractures, humerus fractures in children younger than 15 months, corner or bucket handle fractures. I've never heard of that. The bucket handle. Okay, that's weird. Lateral or posterior rib fractures for children under 5 years old, sternum fractures, vertebrae fractures, femur fractures in children younger than 15 months, corner and or bucket handle fractures, all burns with a handprint or fist pattern, all bruises with a handprint or fist pattern, all bruises which suggest an object such as whip, belt, stick, buckle, cord, etc. Pattern burns except palm burns from stove top burners, e.g. grid, flame. Pattern burns from iron or curling iron of the dorsum of hand, back or buttocks. Circle burns, words, of hand or feet, stocking/glove patterns, subdural hematomas except accidents witnessed by other than caretakers, blunt abdominal and or chest trauma except as above, without verifiable cause, adult bite marks, intercanine distance, circumference or archway width 4 centimeters, catastrophic injury with history of routine fall. Okay, so she doesn't fit any of that. Consult social worker, assessment of psychological risk factors to determine if hotline report is to be made. So they went, hang on, so they skipped social worker and went to the hotline report.
Yeah.
So they did this.
Yeah.
Consult social worker, assessment of psychosocial risk factors to determine if hotline report is to be made. Linear fractures in children younger than 15 months. Linear fractures associated with other injuries. Spinal fractures of humerus in children older than 15 months. Wait, is that one older? Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I never got that when I was in math. I never understood it. I was like, why? Humerus, radius, and ulna fractures associated with other injuries. Yeah. ULNA.
You know. I don't know what.
Radius fractures in children younger than 15 months. Metacarpal. Oh, metacarpal. Fuck me, these words. My big words don't learn so good. I'm sorry, that word literally looks like finagle to me. And it's not. It looks like finagle.
Yeah.
Phalangeal fractures in children younger than 15 months without external evidence of trauma. Clavicle fractures in infant older than 1 month and younger than 15 months. Well, you could just put between, but whatever. Clavicle fracture, medal 1/3. Okay. Pelvis fracture if history is uncertain. I'm just going to say meta fractures in children younger than 4 years old. Femur fractures older than 15 months and younger than 4 years. No witness other than caretaker. Tibia, fibula fractures are non-ambulatory infants. So if they've been brought in. Okay, but not by ambulance. Fractures associated with other injuries, bruises or non-ambulatory infants, bruises that involve soft areas instead of the usual bony prominences, bruises with linear and or pictacular this is not good. Where's your glasses? I'm blind. It's fine, it's fine. We can all struggle together. You guys can struggle to hear me pronounce these words, and I'll struggle to say them. For some reason, I have High School Musical in my head now. Pick something components. Burns which may have been caused by cigarette, other hot liquid burns, all the bigger than 3 centimeters diameter. Accidental scald burns usually have a V shape as the liquid cools and the flows of gravity. Burns with poor or no history. Burns involving neglect. Other non-glancing iron or curling iron burns. Bilateral burns, e.g. both hands, both feet. Apparent life-threatening injury in which history is not clear or social factors seem present. Hair loss, baldness relating to trauma. Fictitious illness suspected. History changes in the course of the workup. Caretakers appear incompetent or under the influence. Failure to thrive primarily. I know what the word is.
Non-organic?
No, I know that. I can say that.
Primarily.
It wouldn't come out.
Ah, okay.
My mouth was eating the word before I could even speak it.
Ah.
Which is what I'm going to use as an excuse for my weight. So this one, they didn't consult with a social worker, but they believe she had a fictitious illness, and they believed that Beata was incompetent.
Yeah.
So they didn't get a social worker involved, and they made the hotline thing.
Yeah.
Even though she, okay, right. So we don't need to. Okay.
No.
So, okay, right. That'll explain why Deborah Hansen is there.
Yeah.
Because she would have been the one that they go to.
Yeah.
I've not seen her testify, but it makes me wonder. I've not seen her so I've tried to not watch anything about this so I can have a more unbiased. Well, I don't know. Basically, I don't know what's gonna happen, or what she's going to say. But I wonder if they did have conversations with her, because she was the one that spoke with them for over 2 hours. So it makes it seem like they tried to go refer to social worker. And Deborah, this witness, understanding different cultures and understanding where Beata, how old she is, so the likelihood of her being around communism, like when she come to America and things like that, probably had a clear understanding that though they weren't abusive, this wasn't fictitious illness. I mean, didn't they claim fictitious illness before? After she was in the hospital. Yeah. It wasn't on admissions. It wasn't the assessment it wasn't the first line. It was after. After, yeah. It was as if it was a reason as to why they made a call. But it seems very much like this witness, she spoke with them and was like, no, they don't need, there's no child abuse. Yeah. And then Sally Smith got involved because Beata wouldn't let it go. Remember the, one of the sisters from the church. Oh, yeah. I sensed the devil behind me. I sensed evil and darkness.
Yeah.
I didn't. Do you know who it was? I didn't turn to look. I just sensed the darkness that they had. Just when you go, oh, that's Sally Smith. There's no chance. No, it's just Sally Smith. She's actually. So the only prep work that I have done is basically, you know, who's on for what, for how long. Kathy Beattie is on day 10. I don't know when. Where is she? Is she on here? No. So I don't know when Sally Smith is on there, but. So what do you think of that? Like, how do you think it's going to be on? What do you think she was like so far from what we've seen, and how do you think she's going to be on Cross? Those questions are also for you at home if you want to comment on it.
Oh, I think Cross. I think she's gonna hopefully fight back at the hospital, because the hospital is gonna be. They're gonna go down hard on her because.
How do you think they're going to treat her?
Like shit. She's their enemy right now.
See, I think they're going to try and paint a picture of her being a disgruntled ex-employee.
Yeah.
That she's only doing this because she has a grudge against the hospital.
Yeah.
Because she was fired or whatever, which I don't think would have been the case.
Then, why were you fired?
Yeah, well, yeah. That'd be interesting if they ever got onto that on Cross.
Yeah.
I mean, this witness, she seems like one of those women that have seen a lot and will only, a person that will let you get away with so much. Only so much, and then they'll have an arsenal of shit to quit back, and you can't defend against it because it's literally they were able to identify every single one of your weaknesses, and they list it out in such beautiful, colourful language.
Yeah.
But they don't shout. They're very calm. It's like an icy death talk. You know what I mean? It's intimidating, but not physically intimidating. It's like you get chills from it. That's just my theory.
I just came to conclusion in my head while listening to stuff here. It was like, you know what? This is gonna sound really bad.
Do you think you should say it?
Oh yeah.
Okay, say it then.
You know what Hopkins Children's Hospital reminds me of?
What?
When I think of it, I get these impressions of those 90s, 50s, 90s, 30s hospitals.
What, the ones where they turn away minorities?
That plus how they treated.
Oh, do you mean how they treated? Do you mean the asylums?
Asylums, yes, that's
Yeah.
the word.
The ones where you could be admitted for simply being lazy
Yeah,
or melancholy.
yeah. Those ones, the old school hospital, American hospital.
There was a woman who had lost her I think it was not only her husband but her like one or two of her children in an accident, and she was sent to an asylum because she was too sad.
Yeah.
I laugh, but it's like, what?
Yeah. And
So she was grief. Okay, sure. Okay, that makes sense.
and those asylums, they are like.
Are you on about the thing that I sent you?
Yeah.
The list of
Yeah.
reasons to be.
Yeah, and I was starting to think of that, and I started to feel like when I hear Hopkins, I start to think of those asylum hospitals, and they were bad.
Well, the
They
thing,
were bad.
but the thing is, though, is that was acceptable at the time.
Yeah.
But it seems very much like, you know, a lot of these doctors still think that they have that godlike authority over
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
And the most dangerous part of it is most of them do.
Yeah.
Like, look at this. This happened in 2016,
Mm.
right? This trial was last year.
Mm.
It took them 8 years and a dead mother
Yeah.
to get to this.
Yeah, that's bad.
It is.
Bad.
It's really bad.
Yeah.
And it's only because, you know, they wouldn't let it go and the attorneys wouldn't let it go. Not the hospital attorneys. They could have, I reckon, I still believe this, they could have literally just apologised.
Hmm.
They could have had a written apology, and I think that would have been, it wouldn't have been enough, but it would have helped
Yeah.
somewhat. But then again, they were so egotistical, they couldn't let a woman like Beata tell them what's what.
Yeah. No.
And that's the problem. But anyway, well, we can go a long time. We're gonna go now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like if you like, dislike if you dislike. If you're more like meh, then you don't have to do either.
Mm.
Subscribe, comment if you want, and yeah, stay hydrated. Wear sunscreen. And if you have snow, don't eat yellow snow, and don't eat brown snow either.
No.
Just don't eat snow unless you know for certain, like you've watched it.
Eat ice cream.
Hang on, could you class snow as the dairy-free alternative to ice cream?
Yeah. Ice also.
Imagine oh boy with ice.
Mm. Mm.
I think I would want to be sick. Anyway, your thing.
Yeah. Beware of the seagulls. Especially during snow, because you can't see the white then.
And
Pet a cat.
bye guys.
Bye bye.